The courtroom was always meant to be a place of fairness, where truth was supposed to outweigh prejudice. But in this particular room, inside those oak-paneled walls, justice bent under the weight of arrogance and power. Judge Margaret Alcott sat high on her bench like a queen ruling her kingdom, gavel in hand, her eyes sharp with disdain. She had a reputation in the county, strict, unyielding, and merciless, especially toward people who didn't fit into her tidy world. Her latest target stood before her, a tall, broad-shouldered black man in his late 30s named Daniel Carter. He was dressed neatly in a suit that had seen better days, his tie slightly frayed but knotted with precision. His posture was upright, his chin steady, though his eyes carried the weariness of someone who had fought battles long before this trial began. Daniel wasn't a criminal. He was a father, a former small business owner who had been dragged into this courtroom over a civil dispute, a foreclosure case that was supposed to be straightforward. But for Judge Alcott, Daniel was more than just another case file. To her, he was an opportunity to remind everyone who really held power in that room. "You expect me to believe," Judge Alcott sneered, peering down at him over the rim of her glasses, "that you, with your history of financial irresponsibility, could have possibly maintained proper payments? Please, I've seen your type before. Always blaming the system, always pointing fingers." Daniel remained calm. His attorney had already advised him not to rise to the bait, but the words cut deep. "Your Honor, with respect, I lost my business during the pandemic. I've made every effort since then to pay what I can and keep my home. I just need time." "Time?" Alcott's voice dripped with condescension. "Do you think the bank runs on excuses? Do you think the world should pause because you couldn't manage your affairs? No, Mr. Carter. The law doesn't bend to hardship." The courtroom murmured. Even the opposing attorney shifted uncomfortably at the judge's tone. Daniel's daughter, a teenage girl named Maya, sat in the back row. She clenched her fists at her father's humiliation. Daniel caught her eye, offering the faintest smile, trying to assure her without words that he could endure this. But Judge Alcott wasn't finished. "Frankly, it amazes me how people like you come in here expecting sympathy. The rules are simple. You pay what you owe, or you lose what you claim is yours. It's not complicated, though I suppose personal responsibility isn't something you're familiar with." The sting of those words echoed through the room. Everyone knew what she meant, though she'd never admitted outright. Her prejudice wrapped itself in the cloak of judicial authority, but the message was clear. Daniel was an equal in her eyes. The gavel struck. "Foreclosure granted. Sheriff's office will oversee the eviction. Case closed." The crack of wood on wood felt like a guillotine falling. Daniel's shoulders tensed, but he didn't break. He simply nodded, gathered his papers, and left with Maya beside him. His dignity remained intact, though the humiliation burned. Outside the courthouse, Maya turned on him, anger flaring in her young face. Dad, she can't talk to you like that. She treated you like you were less than human. Why didn't you say anything?" Daniel placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Because, sweetheart, sometimes silence speaks louder than words. But don't mistake silence for defeat. That woman thinks she passed judgment on me today, but one day—" He paused, his jaw tightening. "One day, she'll face judgment herself." What Daniel didn't know in that moment was how true his words would become. Fate has a way of circling back, and arrogance has a way of planting the very seeds of downfall.
For months, Daniel and Maya lived through the consequences of that day. They moved into a small rental home on the edge of town. The eviction was brutal. The sheriff oversaw it with cold efficiency, boxing up Daniel's life and tossing it to the curb. Neighbors watched, some pitying, others whispering, as father and daughter carried their belongings away in silence.
Daniel worked tirelessly to rebuild. He took on 2 jobs, one as a mechanic during the day, another stocking shelves at night. Every dollar he earned went towards securing stability for Maya. She, in turn, excelled at school, motivated not just by ambition, but by the fire of injustice she'd witnessed. But while Daniel struggled to rise again, Judge Alcott's arrogance only grew. She boasted at social gatherings about her toughness in court, how she never let sob stories sway her judgment. To her colleagues, she was a force to be admired. To those who appeared before her, she was a tyrant cloaked in a robe. Yet beneath the polished veneer of respectability, cracks were forming. Alcott had secrets, ones she thought buried too deep to ever surface. Her financial dealings weren't as pristine as she portrayed. In fact, she was deeply entangled with the very bank that benefited from Daniel's foreclosure. Investments, favors, under-the-table agreements. It was all there, hidden in a web she assumed no one would ever untangle. But arrogance breeds blindness. She failed to see that people talk, that patterns emerge, that the higher one builds their pedestal, the harder the fall when the truth is revealed. One evening, as Daniel sat at his kitchen table balancing bills, Maya dropped a folder in front of them. "Dad, I think I found something." He raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "I've been helping Mrs. Thompson with research for her law class. We were going through public records and I came across something. Look." She opened the folder, revealing documents linking Judge Alcott to private investments in the same bank that foreclosed their home. "She's not just biased, Dad. She's corrupt." Daniel's eyes widened as he scanned the papers. "Maya, do you understand what this means?" Maya leaned forward, determination blazing in her eyes. "It means you were right. She judged you unfairly. But maybe we can make her face her own judgment." Daniel sat back, his mind racing. He had always believed in patience, in quiet resilience. But this was something different. This was truth, hard evidence that could topple the woman who had humiliated him. And so, with Maya's help, he began building a case, not in anger, but in pursuit of justice. He gathered more records, spoke discreetly to others who had suffered under Alcott's rulings, pieced together the puzzle of her corruption. What began as a whisper of possibility grew into a storm that could no longer be contained. The man Judge Alcott had mocked, the man she dismissed as irresponsible, was slowly, meticulously preparing her reckoning. And when it came, it would be a judgment far harsher than anything she had ever delivered from the bench.
The deeper Daniel dug, the clearer the truth became. Judge Margaret Alcott wasn't just biased, she was compromised. Her investments in the bank that profited from foreclosures revealed a conflict of interest so glaring it could shatter her career. But Daniel knew evidence alone wasn't enough. Power protected itself, and Alcott had woven her influence into every corner of the legal system. He needed allies, so he started small, first with the people she had wronged, families like his who had lost homes, small businesses, or custody battles under her gavel. Many were afraid to speak out, fearing retaliation. But when Daniel showed them the documents, their fear slowly gave way to anger. One by one, they joined him. Then he reached out to journalists. Most brushed him off at first. After all, Judge Alcott was respected in public circles. But persistence wears down walls, and eventually, one investigative reporter, Elena Ruiz, agreed to meet him. In a quiet coffee shop late at night, Daniel spread the files across the table. Elena sifted through them with sharp, discerning eyes. When she looked up, her face was pale. "My God," she whispered, "this is bigger than just you. This is systemic." "I don't want revenge," Daniel said, his voice steady. I want justice. She stripped me of my home, mocked me in front of my daughter, treated me like I was less than human. But this isn't just about me. She's been doing this for years. People trust her with their lives, their freedom. She's betrayed that trust. She needs to be exposed." Elena leaned back, studying him. "If we go down this road, there's no turning back. She's powerful. She'll come after you." Daniel's jaw set. She already did. It's time someone stood up to her. Within weeks, Elena's article hit the front page. Judge Alcott under fire. Conflict of interest allegations rock county courthouse. It was meticulously detailed, backed by records Daniel and Maya had uncovered. The story spread like wildfire. Local news picked it up, then state outlets, then national. Suddenly, the woman who had once sneered at Daniel from the bench was on the defensive, scrambling to protect her reputation. The courthouse buzzed with tension. Lawyers whispered in hallways, clerks avoided eye contact, and Alcott's once commanding presence began to crack. In her chambers, she raged, slamming files and screaming at assistants. But rage couldn't silence the truth. The state's Judicial Review Board opened an inquiry. Subpoenas were issued, hearings were scheduled. And through it all, Daniel remained quiet, dignified, the way he had been that day in court. Except now the silence was not submission, it was strength. The turning point came during the public hearing. The room was packed, reporters lining the walls, cameras flashing. Judge Alcott sat stiffly at the table, her face painted with forced calm, though her hands trembled ever so slightly. The board questioned her about her financial ties to the bank. She deflected, denied, twisted her answers into knots. But then came the moment that shattered her defense. Daniel was called to testify. He walked to the stand in his modest suit, shoulders squared, Maya sitting proudly in the front row. For a moment, their eyes met, father and daughter, and he felt the weight of all they had endured. The prosecutor asked him to recount his experience. Daniel spoke clearly, his voice carrying across the chamber. He told the story of that day, of how she mocked him, how she dismissed his pleas, how she stripped him of his dignity with a few cruel words. And then he paused. He turned his gaze toward Alcott. Their eyes locked. The man she had humiliated, staring down the woman who thought herself untouchable. "You told me," Daniel said, his voice steady but sharp with conviction, "that the law doesn't bend to hardship, that personal responsibility is something I wasn't familiar with. You mocked me in front of my daughter, as though I were beneath you. But what I see today, Judge, is that the law does bend, when it bends for you. You were never judging me. You were protecting yourself, your bank, your investments. You used your robe not to serve justice, but to serve greed." Gasps filled the room. The words cut like a blade, sharper than any gavel strike. For once, Judge Alcott had no retort, no sneer, no arrogance to wield. She sat frozen, her face drained of color. The inquiry concluded with overwhelming evidence against her. Within weeks, she was suspended from the bench. Then came the indictments: corruption, fraud, abuse of power. Her career crumbled in the public eye, her name dragged through the mud she once thought herself above. But her true judgment came not in the courtroom she once commanded, but in the silence of her downfall. Friends turned their backs. Colleagues distanced themselves. The community she had ruled with arrogance now whispered her name with contempt. For Daniel, the victory wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. He and Maya moved forward, not with bitterness, but with pride. They had faced injustice head-on and prevailed. Daniel found work again, opening a small auto repair shop with the help of community members who rallied around him. Maya, inspired by her father's resilience, pursued law, determined to become the kind of advocate who would stand for those like her father. And in the quiet moments, when Daniel thought back to that day in court, he realized something profound. The gavel may fall, the judge may mock, the system may bend under the weight of arrogance, but truth endures, and eventually, everyone, no matter how powerful, faces their own judgment.